And let me open up my camera here so you guys can put a face to a name. So again, want to welcome you all to the Sumo Administration Certification class. My name is John Meredith. I am your instructor. I do apologize. I have a little bit of a cold, so if I seem a little snuffly, it's because I really am. I'm glad we're doing this class virtually. But my only ask of you is if you've got questions, please feel free to ask them. If there's some specific topic you want me to drill down on, that's fine. We can certainly do that. Otherwise, we're glad you're here. I'll go over the agenda here in just a second, but want to introduce or let my colleague introduce himself as well. Odell, you want to say hi?
Good morning and welcome. I'm Odell Gordon. I'll be assisting John. He has a plethora of information. So as he mentioned, please ask questions and welcome.
Yep. So Odell will be answering the questions in the chat box, or you can just unmute your mic and ask your questions directly, whatever works for you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my video streaming here, just turn off the camera, save some bandwidth, and let's get this party started. So the course agenda here is a little kind of fun, unstructured, but we're going to have a lot of conversations here about data collection, how to set up our metadata, things along those lines. So it talks about downloading the files you need for Lab 1. When we teach this in some parts of the world, we need that time to be able to download those. Here in the US, the bandwidth is usually very good. The downloads happen fairly quickly. So we'll actually talk about the collectors and go through some slides first, okay? And then we'll do labs 1, 2, and 3. And by the way, it's very much a hands-on class. So we're going to let you log into our training environment, and we're going to have you set up a collector. We're going to have you set up a log source. We're going to have you set up a metric source. So we're going to do that. Then we're going to talk about optimization and how we can do optimization in Sumo Logic. Things like field extraction rules, our field browsers, our views, our partitions, things that we can do to improve optimization. And then we'll talk about the overall administration setup. We're going to go into the administration options. We're going to see all the different administration options and stuff that you can see. Then we'll do labs 4 and 6. Lab 4, you're going to install 2 applications that tell you information about your environment. There's a data volume app that you can install to see how people are using Sumo and what's going on. There's also an audit app that you can install, and you can see how people are using Sumo as well. And then lab 6, we're going to create a data ingestion alert. Now, you might have noticed if you're keen of math and stuff like that, you're like, what happened to lab 5? Lab 5 is out there, and it's basically it's a bunch of different labs from our fundamentals class. And so if you're not familiar with our fundamentals class, or you haven't done that, you can certainly do lab 5. But the goal here is, we assume that you've had some background on creating queries and things like that, but you can do lab 5 if you want to. And I'll show you where the labs are and explain all this in more detail. The last hour, of course, is set up for you to take your certification exam. And this is a 30-question exam. You'll have 60 minutes completed. There's open book, open notes, open slides, and I'll show you where you can download those slides and access those slides as well. Plus, you get to ask Odell and I questions. So if you get stuck on a question, feel free to reach out to Odell or myself, where we'll be proctoring the exam, and feel free to reach out and we'll help you with the questions, pure and simple, okay? So that is the game plan, the agenda for this class. One thing, we do want you to take the certification exam after the end of this class. We're here to help proctor it. We're here to help answer questions. And more importantly, we will reward you, okay? So there is a form here that you get to fill out. And for every certification that you complete, you can put them all on one form, but in this case, it's one class, one certification form. And we will send you a $15 Uber Eats voucher. Now, if any of you happen to be in India, we also work with Ziggy. So that same form, you can fill it out and say, I want a Ziggy voucher. And so for those of you in India, you can do that. But I assume most of us are in the US, where we're going to deal with Uber Eats, and we'll send you an Uber Eats voucher. Typically, it takes us about 48 hours, 2 business days to process this. So, but want to make sure that you guys get take a chance, get certification, get a voucher, pure and simple. So, all right. So our game plan here, like I said, high-level data flow into Sumo Logic, right? We talk about the 3 phases of Sumo Logic. The first phase here is data collection. We're going to set up collectors. We're going to set up sources. In that case, we're going to talk about 2 types of collectors: our hosted collectors, our installed collectors, and all the various sources. This is something that we will do in this class. You will set up an installed collector in this class. We'll also talk about hosted collectors. So I'll give you some exposure to that. Now, again, your sources are the logs and metric sources that you want to bring in. They are going to be part of a collector. The collectors encrypt, compress, and send the data to Sumo Logic. So that's basically how that process happens. Now, once we have data coming into Sumo Logic, then we can search, we can analyze, we can run queries, log queries, metric queries, whatever, use various operators, build some sort of visualizations, line charts, bar charts, whatever. And then we can take those visualizations and we can add them into our dashboards. And so you can create dashboards, you can create alerts and do all this wonderful visualizing and monitoring. Our focus for this class is really going to be on data collection and other administrative type things. So how you can control things. So it's really not going to be on search and analyzing. That's more of a search mastery or a metric mastery class. Visualizing and monitoring, again, we get into that with search mastery. We get into that with metric mastery. We get into that with fundamentals. So that's where that stuff is taught. But again, if you've got questions, feel free to ask. We're getting your data into Sumo Logic. The journey of 10,000 logs begins with a single collector, right? We've got to get data in here. You're either going to have an installed collector or a hosted collector. If you're on the cloud, it will be a hosted collector. If you're using software as a service, it's a hosted collector. Otherwise, if it's on-prem, it's going to be an installed collector. And so you will actually install some software that will allow you to compress, encrypt, and send some data to your environments. And we'll walk through that. Once you do that, then we can write queries, right? We can write log searches, metric searches. We can do all kinds of observability things, all kinds of, nifty little stuff to see how things are behaving, to understand what your logs are trying to tell you, okay? What your metrics are trying to tell you. And then finally, you can create these rich dashboards, install various applications that we've got, which are basically pre-built dashboards and queries that you can take advantage of to tell the tale that you want. To me, the nicest thing about this product is, well, I can create queries that then build what I want to do. I can actually install an application. And by installing that application, it's already probably taken the queries and stuff that I need. And it's probably got me somewhere between 70 to 90% of where I need to be with its pre-built queries and its pre-built dashboards. Then all I've got to do is maybe make the last 10 to 30% adjustment change, maybe, change a couple things to really focus on the data that I need, that I want, that I've got to have. So we do try to make it simple for you, try to be helpful. Again, one of our core values is we are in it with our customers. So let's talk a little about data collection strategy, because as an administrator, that's obviously something that's near and dear to your hearts, okay? So again, we've got hosted collectors. So if you're on AWS, if you're on Azure, if you're on Google Cloud Platform, if you're using software as a service like Salesforce or Office 365 or Google Suite, you can install a hosted collector. Actually, that hosted collector is already installed for you, and you can then use that hosted collector and then define the sources of the data that you want. Now, in defining the sources of the data that you want, that's where we talk about, gee, if I'm going to use an AWS S3 bucket, I need authentication to get to that S3 bucket, right? If I'm going to use Azure Monitor, I need authentication and security to get into and see that network monitor. So when you set up your sources, is typically when you deal with authentication. So again, all these logs, metrics, and things that you can grab off of the cloud will come through your hosted collectors. And again, your hosted collectors will encrypt, compress, and send, as well as sending any metrics through HTTP, and they'll send them into the Sumo Logic cloud that you can then ingest. If you've got a bunch of on-prem equipment, some servers and stuff like that, some firewalls, then you can install your installed collector on each and every machine that you have that you want to grab logs and metric data from, or you can provide a consolidated installed collector. So you install a collector on a machine, you then have these machines forward their logs to this machine. This machine will then compress, encrypt, and send that information through your firewall into the Sumo Logic cloud. And then you're able to do the analysis and stuff that you want. This is particularly helpful if these machines are not connected to the internet. So if you got machines that aren't connected to the internet, this consolidated installed collector could be very handy. So we talked about how you can have an installed collector, how you can have hosted collectors. Hosted collectors are hosted by us. You don't have to install anything. You don't have to do anything. They're just there. Installed collectors, you do have to install. And by the way, this installed collector is a little lightweight Java-based application. It'll typically take up less than 1% of your CPU and less than 1% of your memory. So it's not a heavy lift at all. How many collectors do you need, right? So, typically we recommend that as far as installed collectors go, you can have an installed collector on a dedicated machine that you can forward all the logs to, and you can ingest. So here's when you can install it on a dedicated machine. Here's where you have to have more than one installed collector. So if you're running a very high bandwidth network with high logging levels and things like that, or you require a certain centralized collection point from any of your sources, you can in fact do that. Hang on a second, I saw a hand go up. All right, great. Now, if you've got more than 500 separate files, like log files and things like that, then you probably want to install a separate collector. If you got more than 500 separate files, you want to probably start breaking it down and have a second separate collector. Additionally, if you're using this collector and this collector already has memory or CPU limitations, let's say it's on a database server, right? If you're on a database server, that database says, how much memory do I have? How much CPU do I have? I'm taking it all. So you're already bound by how much memory and CPU you have available. So obviously I would use another machine, but if you can't, then you may want to think about installing another collector somewhere. If you're using AWS and you're in separate regions, then you may want to have separate collectors, one for each region. And then also, if your combined logging traffic on one collector is expected to be about 15,000 events per second, you're going to want to start standing up a second or third collector. Okay. So of course, this information here makes really great test questions. And so you might want to make note of this slide. You do a screen capture of it, or as I said, in a few minutes, I'll show you where the slides are. All right. Again, we've got our hosted collectors, we've got our installed collectors where we're installing a collector on each machine that we want to grab logs and data from, or we've got the centralized data collection process that we can go through. And let's talk about these. So as far as our cloud data collection, right? You're on the cloud, you're on AWS, you're on Azure, Google Cloud Platform. You're using, Office 365 or something, software as a service. So here's all your source types. And again, the benefits of this, and make some great test questions, are that they're hosted by Sumo Logic. You don't have to install anything. You don't have to configure anything, right? So very easy to use cloud-based collection. Local data collection, where I'm going to install a collector on each and every machine. Where we tend to see this is when we're grabbing, our operating system files, local Windows event logs, things along those lines. It doesn't require any dedicated hardware. You can install it on your existing machines. It will give you direct access to your logs. And you'll find that this application that you install does have some logs into itself, so you can troubleshoot and see what's going on. Or if you have to, you can reach out to our support folks and we'll help you troubleshoot. It is going to require these machines to have internet access, so that is a requirement. And obviously, you're going to have to install the collector on them, and if necessary, upgrade the collector as time comes. As I said, it typically doesn't take much resource. It's going to take about 1% of your CPU and 1% of your memory. So it's not a heavy lift, like I said, at all. So again, and by the way, you can also automate these deployments if you want to. You can actually automate these collector deployments to make it easy if you need to. Now, the third type we talked about here is the centralized data collection. Here, we're going to have one centralized installed collector, and we're going to forward all the other machines there. So things like your syslogs, right? Your Windows remote events, your cloud APIs and stuff like that. This is a typical scenario we might see this. Drawbacks, right? Drawbacks. You got to have internet access on that machine that's going to have this, but the other machines don't need internet access. So if those machines don't have internet access, this is a good solution for it. This consolidated installed collector. Typically, if you're running a consolidated installed collector, you're probably doing it for other things as well. So you can leverage your existing logging infrastructure if you want to. Now, some of the areas it falls down on is obviously if you decide to add another bunch of servers or a bunch of sources, this may not scale as easily as an installed collector that you just install on that machine. So you may be cognizant of scaling issues. Also, it probably requires some dedicated hardware. So you're going to take a box and you're going to install the collector on it. You're going to have all the other machines for their stuff to this particular box. So we assume that you're going to need dedicated hardware for this. And then the other thing is, unless you put it on some sort of a clustered environment, there is no failover and scaling up and down and things like that. So there is some issues there with complexity. But typically, we see this as far as the scenarios and stuff that we see and that sort of thing. Pointed out the stuff that I think you'll find mostly on the test. All right. As far as metrics go, like I said, we talked about how you can ingest logs. We can also ingest metrics. And metrics come in a couple of different formats. They come in Carbon 2.0 format. They come in Graphite format. They come in Prometheus format. And we can accept those three. We can accept those with any problems. We can accept metrics from Docker, Kubernetes, again, all the various cloud platforms. And you can, again, use the same collectors and the same structure that you've got for your logs for your metrics. And you'll find that we will take, I said that, there's a couple of formats, Carbon 2.0, Graphite, Prometheus. We can ingest all those different formats, and we can also convert them so that you use a Carbon 2.0 type format, which is like a key value pair, right? My metric name and then my metric value, or what the metric is, or maybe I want to talk about my metric, what region it's in or what country it's in, and then the specific country, the value of the country, US, Canada, whatever. One thing about metric ingestion and retention, when we ingest metrics, we refer to these as data points per minute, DPMs. And when you purchase Sumo Logic, we charge you by how much you ingest, how much data you plan on ingesting into Sumo. That's what we charge you by. And with that, we give you a certain number of DPMs based on your ingestion. A lot of customers do not use their allocated DPMs. They're underutilizing their metrics, just so you know. And we'll show you later where you can find that information out. Now, the trick is that we do not ingest metrics that are more than a week old. So if you try to bring in some historical metrics that are more than a week old, it's going to filter them right out. Okay, it's going to filter them right out. The other thing is when we ingest metrics, you set up your metric sources, you decide how often you want them to come in. Every 10 seconds, every 2 minutes, whatever, somewhere in between. You decide how often you want them to come in. Now we'll take those raw metrics, whatever the interval is, maybe 10 seconds or whatever, and we'll store them in the raw, and we'll store them for 7 days. Then at 1 minute and 1 hour increments, we will do a roll up on those metrics. So as we ingest those metrics at 1 minute, we're going to calculate the min, the max, the sum, the average, and the count. And we'll retain that 1 minute resolution for 30 days. So we're going to basically create some lookup tables here, some roll-up tables, where we can put those 1 minute resolutions and we store them for 30 days. We make them available for 30 days. Then we also do it at the hour interval. So at the hour interval, we do a min, a max, an average, a sum, and a count. And that means we can go back for that 13 months. So if you're looking at metrics and you want to go back, say 6 months, you're going to be able to do it within 1 hour resolutions. If you want to go back, say 30 days, you can do that within 1 minute resolutions. And if you want to go back within 7 days, you can go down and see the actual raw ingestion values that you've got. So that's our metric retention policy. And again, makes a great test question. Any questions so far? All right, then let me press on. Now, with metrics, obviously we can also, with metrics and logs, we can also do some metadata design. As you're probably familiar, we have metadata tags. So you can reference your collector, whatever your collector name is, by saying _collector equals, and then the name of that collector. So when we set up collectors, we give them names, and we can reference them by saying underscore collector equals that name. Same with sources. We can say underscore source equals and by that name. However, we've got a tag here that we really like. It's called underscore source category. You'll notice it's in bold. And it's in bold because we really like this one. This one is where you can freely structure. When you define a source, you can go in and define its source category. And you can specify the source category with slashes so that the first part of the tag is a major assembly, right? Maybe it's your region, maybe it's your prod, maybe it's your dev, maybe it's your AWS East, whatever. Then slash within that environment, what subassembly am I talking about? Maybe I'm talking about web servers or email servers or authentication servers. Then slash, I can specify what authentication logs I'm looking at, what email logs I'm looking at. So you can break this thing down with slashes. So you could have like prod or dev or QA, and then you could have the subassemblies underneath that and continue to add slashes. So that's one of the ways that we can use metadata here to break things down. There's another way that we're going to talk about when I actually get into the collectors and the sources, another technique that you can use as well. But back to this source category best practices. Again, you can break it down if you want to by your environment, prod or dev or QA. So here I've got prod, then slash, and I could say, here's my app, whatever my app is, slash, in this case, it's going to be web servers, I guess, since this is Apache Access. So I can put slashes in here to break it down from a major assembly all the way to a minor assembly within that assembly. Or maybe I want to break it down by application, or maybe I want to break it down by business unit. So you and I can create these source categories. Now, there's a little link down here that I'm going to go ahead and click on. And this is in our documentation, our product documentation. You know, best practices for creating good source categories and bad source categories. And I believe there's a question or two on this, but I'm going to take this link and I'm going to copy it and I'm going to go ahead and paste it and put it in the chat box. So just as an FYI, there you go. Okay. Now, besides using this source category to define your scope of searches, right? So I can say when I'm writing a query, I want to see source category equals networking / firewall / star. This is going to show me all of my network and all of my firewall stuff, regardless of what this field is. This field is a wildcard. That star is a wildcard. But I can also use it to index and partition your data. So you can use source categories for creating partitions. And so you may want to, again, create different partitions for different purposes within your company. Some that you're going to access frequently, some that you're going to access infrequently. You can also use these source category tags to control who sees what data through role-based access control. RBAC stands for role-based access control. And so when you create a role, you can automatically filter and constrain what that role can see. And I'll show you that when we get into the roles and role creation. But you can do so much with this source category. Not only can you define the scope of your searches, you can use it to index and partition. You can also use it to see what data people can see through role-based access control. So let's get ready to go ahead and do labs 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to show you where the labs are in just a minute. I'm going to log into the environment in just a minute. But in lab 1, we're going to install a collector. That's what we're going to do. Now, you're going to install this collector on your computer. Maybe you can install software on your computer. Maybe you can't. Or maybe you don't want to. If you don't want to or you can't, that's fine. You can follow along with us and just watch and all that stuff. I will install the collector. I will install the sources and all that stuff on my computer. So I will do labs 1, 2, and 3 on my machine. And if you want to follow along and do them as well, that's great. If you can't, that's fine too. I understand. Okay. But in lab 1, we're going to install our collector. Lab 2, we're going to install our Apache access logs. And then lab 3, we're going to go ahead and install some metric host. So we're going to go through that exercise. And so let's talk about where labs 1, 2, and 3 are. Let's talk about logging into our environment. So ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to fire up Google Chrome or Firefox web browser. And I'd like you to go to service.sumologic.com. That's service.sumologic.com. So here I'm going to open a new tab, service.sumologic.com. And when I go here, you'll notice it asks me to log in. Great. Now, in order to log in, you're going to log in with a training administration account. So you're going to log in with training plus admin, and then you say I got 3 hashtags there. Those 3 hashtags are to be replaced with a 3-digit number of your choice. So I'd like you to think of a 3-digit number. I'd like you to type it in the chat box. Okay. There you go. David typed in 352. Excellent. So please type in, figure out which one you want to use. If you want to be 007, now's your opportunity. You could take 007. I'm going to take 603 just because that is the area code for the state of New Hampshire where I live. Okay. And so I'll type at 603 at sumologic.com. So it's an email address. So your email is training plus admin with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. And then the password is, and let me turn this on so you can see it as it happens as I type it in, capital SECURITY, security with a capital S, number two, exclamation mark. So the password is security 22 exclamation mark. And then when you click sign in, poof, it's going to let you in. It's going to log you into our environment. So I'd like you all to go ahead and log in and make sure that you can log in. If you're having problems logging in, please let me know. Now you might ask, well, why do we want to log into my environment? Why can't I log into my company's environment? You could, but I don't know what data you have. I don't know if you've got any of the data that we use for our classes. So this is an environment that you can use to play around. And as such, I encourage you to use our environment. Now, once you get logged in, I'd like you to go ahead in the participants area. You should have a little place where you can raise your hand. I'd like you to go ahead and raise your hand when you're logged in. Okay. And so people are raising their hand. If you're having problems, please let us know. Let Odell or myself know so we can help you out. The good news is it's a small class, so we should be able to have a little fun here and have a good time. I show 4 hands up out of 9 so far. I've got 5 hands up. There we go. Got 6 hands up. Very good. So it looks like we're all logging in. A couple of you are having problems logging in or haven't logged in just yet or haven't raised your hand. So just let me know if you're all logged in and life is good. Now, what I'm going to do here, folks, just so you know, I've logged in as this training admin account, and that will work for the labs and the exercises and all stuff. But I'm going to actually log out. I'm going to log in with my credentials. And the reason I do that is I have a higher level of permissions. And there's some things I'm going to show you as far as administrator that you can do in our environment that you're not going to have permissions to do. We have to protect our environment, right? It's a public facing environment. And therefore, there's some things you can't do with even when it's training admin account. So to log out of my account, as you're probably aware of, if your navigation panel, this area over here to the left is not open and you see this stack of pancakes or whatever you want to call it, hamburger menu, if you open it up by clicking on it, then if you go down here to where your login name is, if you click on it, you'll see there's an option to sign out. So I'm going to go ahead and click sign out, and I'm going to log in with my credentials, which I have completed administrative rights in this environment. Okay. All right. Anybody have any problems logging in? Otherwise, I'm going to assume that those of you who wanted to be logged in are logged in and life is good. Okay, good. All right. So when we're logged in, when you log in, whatever number you use may have a whole bunch of tabs across the top here. If it does, don't worry about it. I'll show you how to clean those up in a little bit. We'll show you how to fix that. But there's a couple things I want to point out to you. In this home tab, right here, there's a learn section. And here in the learn section, we advertise our micro lesson videos. These are quick videos, 5 to 10 minutes, where you can learn about, how to set up a collector and do a whole bunch of things. You can be found in our YouTube section. So if you go out to YouTube and you do a search for Sumo Logic, you'll see we've got a whole bunch of micro lesson videos out there that you can use. Okay. If I scroll down here, you'll see here's my labs for fundamentals. Here's my labs for administration. And so we're going to use these labs. I'll also show you where these labs are linked to and where they come from. There's information here about signing up for training, our community, all kinds of resources here for you. Okay. But we're going to use these labs. So that's where we can get a hold of our labs. The second thing I want to show you is where can I get a hold of the slides? Where can I get a hold of a recording of this class? That sort of thing. So again, here on the home tab, this time if we click certification and we click get certified. Now, when I go in here to get certified, I'm going to see panels that you're not going to see. And there's a reason for it, right? Where it says become a Sumo Logic expert. You don't see that. I see it. And the reason is because I'm logged in as a named user. Okay. These are our self-paced courses. And if you want to go into your company's Sumo Logic environment as a named user with your name, and you go into, again, certification, and you get certified, you'll see this. Okay. We turn it off because we don't want training analyst 603 or training admin 401 to take this course, because we want to know who's taken the course by name. John Meredith, Fred Flintstone, Barney Rubble, whatever. So that's why that's turned off for you. Also, the get certified is turned off for you for these training analyst and training admin accounts. So you won't see this get certified. When we get around to taking the exam, we'll have you log off the training environment. Excuse me. And we'll have you log into your company's environment with your credentials to take your exam. So that's why you don't see those. Okay. Okay. You're seeing both of those. Okay. Interesting. Now, what I'm looking for here is the recorded live training. That hopefully you all do see. And if I click on recorded live training, I get to pick whatever course I want. And I'll pick, in our case, we're taking the administration Cert Jam course. So let's click on that. And here is a recording of this class.
My name is Chuck.
So here we have Josh Brotheim, who's our training manager, conducting the class, going through the slides. It's a recorded session that you can listen to. Additionally, over here, you've got the slides. And you've also got the lab guide in a PDF format if you want. So this is where we have all this information, not only for this class, but if I go back for every class, every certification class that we offer, they are all right there. So if you don't have time to take a class, but you want to go through the labs and listen to it, you can certainly do that. Okay. Also, if I go back one, when you log in with your personal account, you can also actually take the self-paced courses. So here in the self-paced courses is where you can take under general, is where the admin self-paced course is. It's under general. We broke these down by either security or observability, just to make it a little easier for folks to find. Also, by the way, here's where I can find the current password for the learning and training analyst account. So the training analyst account, that we update this password monthly. And actually we update both passwords monthly, the training analyst account and the training admin account. But here's where I can see what the training analyst account is. We tend to keep the training admin account under lock and key a little bit. So if you want the new password, when the password changes, and by the way, since April is not that far away, it will change next week, next Monday. It changes on the first Monday of the month. So if you need to know what the new password is, right now it's security22 exclamation mark. You need to know what it is for April. You can send an email to training@sumologic.com and we'll let you know what that password is. So it's just an extra step here. Now, I just wanted to mention that to you. Again, that information, let me go back to this. Any questions about where you can find the slides and the information? Okay. Back to my Sumo Logic environment, back to my Learn section. Down here in my administration area, if I click on introduction, this is basically telling me how to access my training environment. So information about accessing training environment, you got to send an email to training@sumologic.com. so that we'll send you an account and we'll ask you a password. Okay. You don't have to worry about that. You're in class. We've given you the account. You've assigned yourself a 3-digit number. You know what the password is. But if you were taking this on your own, that's how you do it. And Odell did a great job here of providing this link here for you as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do labs 1, 2, and 3 in here, and then we're going to take a break. So if I click on down here at the bottom where it says lab 1, install a collector, it's going to tell us what we're going to do. We're going to install a collector. In fact, the first thing it wants us to do is it wants us to go ahead and download this text file. Now, if you're on a Windows machine, you should be able to right click on this and say download the file, right? Pretty simple. If you're on a Mac, it's a little more complicated, right? We've got to save link as, and I'm going to download this somewhere in my computer, whether it's my desktop, my documents, my downloads. I don't care where you download it to, as long as you know where you put it. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and download it to my desktop. And we're going to use that in lab 2. That's why we're downloading it now. Then here they want us to go ahead and install a collector. So how do we do that? Per our directions, they want us to go back to our Sumo environment. They want you to open up this wonderful navigation panel. And then this navigation panel down here is our main menu. So if you click on the main menu, specifically under manage data, and you click on collection, here is where all of our collectors are visually shown. And up here in the corner is where you and I can add a collector. So per our directions here in lab 1, excuse me, that'll close that up. Per our directions here in lab 1, and by the way, I'm going to right click on lab 1. I'm going to pin it just to make it easy to switch back and forth. I'm also going to pin my Sumo Logic environment. Since I'm on Google Chrome, I can do that. But this way I can switch back and forth fairly easily. Anyway, as I scroll down here, it says we want to click on add collector. And then we can choose if we want to, under add collector, whether we want to install a collector or a hosted collector. Now, for this part of the hosted collector, I just want you to watch, okay? Because we're not going to install a hosted collector. We're going to install an installed collector. But I'm going to show you what an hosted collector looks like. So if I click on hosted collector, remember a hosted collector, you're in the cloud, right? You're on AWS, Azure, something like that. So you can give this thing a name. I'm going to call it JWM hosted collector, whatever name you want to give it. Doesn't make any difference. I can put a description in here. I can put a category in here. Okay. I can add fields and metadata. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. I can assign it to a budget if I want to. So you can define budgets of who, maybe which department you're grabbing this information from, that sort of thing. And then also what sort of time zone do you want to use? Okay. Now this is for your collector. And then I click save. So there wasn't anything real complicated there. Okay. It didn't like my name because I already have a JWM collector. So let me put today's date in here, 0329, just so I've got a unique collector. I've got to go clean that up. Okay. Now it says, okay, great. You've added that collector. Do you want to add a new source? And I'm going to say cancel. I'm going to go find my collector. Hang on a second. I'm going to search for, there it is, JWM hosted collector. There it is. There are no sources underneath it. And I click on this triangle, there's nothing underneath it, right? There's no sources. Now, how do I add a source? I can click on add source. And then here are all of my various cloud-based sources. Office 365, Google Suite Apps, Akamai, Azure Events Hub, various traces, Mindcast, Netscope, Duo, Salesforce, Okta, Workday. And if I continue to scroll down, here's all my AWS stuff that I want. So here is where you get to add a hosted source. Now, if I grab, for example, your Office 365, if I click on that, you'll notice that I get to give it a name and I get to give it a description and all that stuff. But down here is where I do the authentication. I need to have rights that has access to those logs, right? So whatever you sign in as has to have access to those logs. So I can, you can, we can add these web-based sources here. Again, if I go and I want to grab something from AWS, maybe I want to grab my CloudTrail information. When I go in here, again, it's going to ask me for my S3 buckets and stuff like that. And it's going to ask me, how do I access this? What security am I going to use, right? So this is where the authentication component comes into for your cloud-based stuff. Just want you to be aware of how hosted things work, okay? All right, so it looks like I'm middle of step source. Do I want to exit? Yes, I do. I'm going to get the heck out of here. Again, you shouldn't be following along with me right now. You should just be watching. Now, when I go back to collectors, and by the way, I don't need this hosted collector anymore, so I'm going to delete it. I just wanted you to see a hosted collector. They're not hard to set up, okay? By the way, I'm also going to search for that other hosted collector. There it is. Get rid of it as well, okay? Now, what I do want you to do, and here's where I want you to follow along with me. Up here, again, if you're not there, you want to go into the main menu, manage data, collection, and you want to click on add collector. And in lab number 1, we are going to choose installed collector. So let's click on installed collector and then pick the collector for your operating system. If you're running on Windows, you're probably running a 64-bit Windows box by now. I don't think anybody's on a 32-bit box anymore. I hope not. So you would select that. I happen to be on a Mac, so I will click Mac OS. If you're on a Linux or if you're on a Unix box, you download it appropriately. So you're going to click on the appropriate collector and it's going to download it for you. Any problems or questions with that? Now, once it's downloaded, per our direction, we're going to open up that download. So again, we're going to install this collector. So in my case, I'm installing it on a Mac. I'm going to open up my Mac DMG file. There is my Sumo Logic collector installer app. And I'm going to simply double click on it. And of course, it's going to say, do you sure you want to do this? Yes, I do. Open it. And it's going to run through the installation wizard. Now, I will make you a personal bet. My personal bet is, as I install this the first time, it's going to puke. It's going to throw an error. It's going to have a problem. And this is something I always seem to have with my machine the first time I install it. I will rerun it and it'll run fine the second time. But when I run and try to install it, it says, hey, I need to install some software. So I need your password, right? I want to be able to install this on your computer. So as you can see, we take passwords of Sumo Logic fairly seriously. So now I've given my password. Now I'm ready to run my setup installation. So here we go. I'm going to run my setup installation. It's real simple. I'm going to go ahead and click next. I want you to click next as well. I'm going to accept the agreement, license agreement. Of course, you can read through it if you want. Click next. And in my case, it's going to run this installation. It's going to uninstall my previous version, install my new version. And when it gets to it, it's going to throw an error. I'll bet. Because it does this typically every time. It's installing my new software. Okay. And then I hit next here. And by the way, I want you to stop where you are. If yours ran fine, and it should have, mine's going to throw an error and I'm going to run this again and it will go away. So when I hit next, it says, oh yeah, I've got an error. I'm going to tell it to quit. It's going to quit. I'm going to run it again. This time it'll run smooth. No problems. Okay. So bear with me. I just does it every single time. It's pretty consistent. I don't know why yet. I haven't talked to our tech support folks to see why it coughed a fur ball, but it did. So again, I'm being prompted here for my password. So waiting for that prompt to show up. There it is. All right, now I've got my setup wizard. I click next. I agree to the license. I click next. Now it's going to install. Okay. Yeah. No, David, your Mac didn't have that issue. It probably won't. Mine does because I do this fairly often for a lot of different classes. And so it just, the first time it pukes It just throws a curve. This time it came through fine. So I'm not sure what the problem is. Now, just so you know, I get to this page here where it says summary, collector name, collector URL, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And one other thing I've got to do, bear with me a second, guys. I apologize for this. I should have done this beforehand. Let me find my existing collector and let me throw it away. Otherwise, it's going to create a brand new collector with another number on it. Okay. So I just had to do that. You don't have to do that. It's something I have to do. Okay. So here it says my collector name, my collector URL, all this good stuff. What is this stuff? Well, if I click on advanced settings, I'm not going to change anything, but I want to show you advanced settings. Here's where you can define your collector name. By default, it uses your host name. I like that. I like that it uses my host name. That's my host name, jmeredith-mac. And I can specify my host name too if I wanted to. Don't really need to. I can specify my category, my source category, but I'll do that at the source level, not here at the collector level. I can put in a description if I want. I can tell it what time zone to take, okay, for my logs, what time zone to use. I can throttle how much of my CPU it can use. A couple of other little settings in here. Under your URL, I want it to go to the default URL that sends it to Sumo Logic. But I can override that if I need to. If I'm using some sort of data collection API URL, I can have it go there. You're using a proxy. Here's where you can specify your proxy settings. If you want, you can automatically install your sources by putting them in a JSON file. We're going to install our sources manually. We're going to install 2 sources, one in lab 2, one in lab 3. Okay. And then also, who do I want this application to run as? Now I'm on a Mac, so on my Mac, it will run as root. If you're on a Windows machine, it'll run as administrator based on these settings. If I wanted to run with my J Meredith account, I could change that. I'm not going to, but this does create an interesting challenge because in a Mac, not everything that root has access to does it have access to stuff that's in your account. Apple has done a very good job of separating and saying, look, your account on this Mac is different than root. Even though you're an administrator, root doesn't necessarily have access to your files. So we'll talk about that when we get into lab 2. So I'm going to take the defaults here, or I'm going to basically leave them alone. And again, I'm going to click next. And now I'm back to my summary. And I'm going to click next again. Now, here it says, look, we're going to encrypt data and send it to Sumo Logic. What do you want me to use for that encryption and authentication? Do you want me to use a token or do you want me to use an access key? A token or an access key, and where do I get those? Well, first of all, a token is used one time and one time only. So you can use a token, but it's a one-time thing. Once it's done, once it's used, it's done. You can't reuse it. An access key you can use as many times as you want to. Our access key is patterned after AWS's access key. So you're going to have an access ID and an access key that makes that up. We want to select access key here, and we want to click next. This is now going to ask us for fields called access ID and access key. Now we're going to hold here for a second. Going to go back to our Sumo Logic environment. We're going to go down here for our directions just to kind of make sure we get caught up on our directions. So there's the license agreement. There's our summary. And now we told it we want to do an access ID, and we're here. So to generate this access key, we're going to go into our Sumo Logic environment. You're going to go into Sumo. And again, here in your collector, where it says add collector, just to the right of that is access keys and tokens. Here's where you can get your access keys and or your tokens. And if I click on access keys, it takes me to my account, my preferences, where my access keys are. Now, to tell you the truth, I don't need any of these access keys anymore. They've all been blown away when I reinstalled my collector. So I'm going to throw my access keys away. If you want to throw your access keys away, you can. But over here, there's a blue add button. I do want you to click on that blue add button. And you can call this thing anything you want to. I will put my initials in here. I will say client. I will say underscore AK for access key. You can call it my access key. You can call it whatever you want. You're going to give it a name. Now, if you're using some sort of allow list, and I'll talk about this later, deny list functionality, you may have to add your domain. I don't believe any of us are using allow list, so we don't have to worry about this right now. I'll come back and talk about it later. We want to click on the button that says create key. When we click on this button that says create key, there's our access ID and our access key. Now, this is the only time that you're going to see this access key value. So if your company has a policy that says anytime you generate an access ID or an access key, you must put it in a password manager or text file or whatever. Now is the time to do this. You would copy your access ID and your access key over to that password manager or that text file or whatever you're doing. Because once I click done here, I will never see the access key value again. Now, what we want to do is we want to take this access ID. We want to click on this button that says copy. We're going to go back over here to our collector installation. We're going to do a Command V or Control V or whatever to copy and paste. Then we're going to go to access key, put our cursor in there, take this access key, copy, and paste it in. Then when we click next, it's going to try to authenticate and encrypt data with Sumo Logic. And if it's able to authenticate and encrypt data with Sumo Logic, we're going to be good to go. There we go. Congratulations, you are done. There's no errors, no problems, no issues. I click finish. My collector is now installed. When I click done here, as I see, here is my access key that I created. There is my access ID. If I click on the pencil, I still don't see the access key in here. As I told you, you won't. So if I really meant to store that or put that someplace, I better create another one, all right? Because that's where I need to do that. So congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. You have, I have, we have completed lab number 1. We generated our access key. We've copied and pasted it in. We finished this up. Oh, and then what we can do is we can go in here to our collector and we can search for your host name and you should see your collector. So here is my collector. And if I click on this triangle, nothing really happens because I don't have a source yet. That's what we're going to do in labs 2 and labs 3. We've installed our collector. Any questions so far? Let's move on to labs 2 then. So we lab 1, we installed our collector. Lab 2, let's go ahead and add a source. Remember that we downloaded that Apache file to our desktop? Well, what we want to do is we want to take this Apache file and we want to move it to a specific directory that root can access. So if you're on a Mac, right? If you're on a Mac, let me go back to my host here for a second. I don't need this anymore, so let me close this up. Okay. And I want to find my Apache file. There it is. There's my Apache file. Now, I can, if I want to, keep this same name. But that's a lot of typing, okay? But I'll go ahead and keep it the same name. That's fine. I could change the name here if I want to, but we'll get into that in just a minute. But what I need to do, if you're on a Mac, I need to put this in some place that root can access. Root cannot access your desktop. It can't. Apple made sure they couldn't. So if I go into my Finder, and again, my Finder is my Windows Explorer, and in my Finder, if I go up here where it says go, and I can say I want to go to folder, what I want you to do is I want you to go to your temp folder, TMP folder, your private temp folder. This is something that root can access, okay? And all I simply want to do is take this file and I want to put this in the temp folder. Now, for those of you on a Windows machine, find your TEMP folder, your temp folder, and drag this file into your TEMP folder. Okay, you can put it anywhere as long as the root or the administrator has rights to be able to access this folder, you're fine. In the case of a Mac, I got to put it here because there's only some places, certain places that root can access. And yes, I could change file permissions and give root access to things, but it's a bit more complicated. So here in lab 2, we found our file that we downloaded. We went in and we moved it to, in our case, a Mac TMP directory. In the case of a Windows, a TEMP directory. Now we're going to create this log source. So we're going to go into our Sumo Logic environment. We're going to find our collector. And here under collector, there's an option to add source. Add source. So we're going to click on add source. And here are, for our installed collector, the different sources that we can add. You notice here I can grab Windows event logs, performance logs, Active Directory logs, if you're on Windows, sys logs, Docker logs, all kinds of host metrics. We'll get into host metrics in a bit. But in our case, we want a file that's on our local machine. So we're going to choose local file. If we wanted a file that's on another machine, we would choose remote file. So we're going to choose local file here. And it asks us to give this thing a name. Okay. And I believe the directions want us to name this Apache logs. Okay. So you can name it anything you really want. I will say JWM, my initials, Apache logs. I like that. I can put a description in here. Now, here's where I need to put something in, my file path. And so if you're on a Mac, you could take this text right here and you can swipe it. Just make sure you don't include this last period, okay? But you can type in or put in where that file is located. When collection should begin. And I said about 24 hours ago, the default setting, that's fine. I'm going to go with that. Again, I could specify the source host, put a host name in here. I don't need to, but I could. And under source category, this is something we do recommend that you do. So under source category, they want us to put in here prod Apache access. So we will put in here prod /Apache /access. Now remember, the source category is one of those fields that you and I can search by, right? So that's why we recommend you take advantage of this. Some companies who are fairly large and very big on the enterprise, right? In order to break things down for them, they've got to put a lot of slashes in here. It's a bit laborious. So another way that you can filter for specific metadata and fields is you can go in here and add a field. You click add field, you give it a field name and a value. So for example, maybe I want to break it down by business unit. My field name might be BU for business unit. My value might be finance or accounting or HR or whatever. I can put other field names in here if I want to. And I can search by those field names and those values in my metadata. So we're adding additional metadata in here if you want to. And that's how the companies who can't seem to, the source category is too big, laborious for them, they do it this way. They add those additional fields. Now, we're not going to add any fields. I just wanted to show you that's capable. Another thing I want to mention to you here is our advanced options for logs, okay? Right now, I've told it, here is the file path for this specific file. I could have said, I want to go to a directory, and I could have put a file path into a directory, not a specific file, but a directory. And then down here, I can say in the deny list, grab everything out of that directory except for the following files. So in here, I can say, I can deny list, I specify the file names I don't want it to grab. So you can define a file directory or a specific file that you want to ingest. But that's what this deny list does. Here's where we're going to decide what we want to do about timestamps. Do we want to extract the timestamps from the log file entries? Or do we want to create our own? And then last but not least, processing rules for log. I'm going to show you this. We're not going to do anything here, but I'm going to show you this. A lot of times in your data, you might have sensitive data, right? You might have social security numbers, customer ID, customer phone numbers, credit card information. You can create a rule when you process logs and metrics, give it a name, write an expression, could be a regular expression, could be whatever, write an expression. And when things match that, you can either exclude them, include them, hash them, mask them, or whatever you want. So this is a way that you can mask out credit card data, social security information, stuff like that. That's what these processing rules are. I'm not going to create any rules. I'm not going to worry about that, but I wanted you to be aware of it. Any questions so far? Okay, let's go ahead and hit save. And now we have saved this. And in a few minutes, I will look and see my Apache data. It's going to take some time to ingest. I'm located in Bedford, New Hampshire. My environment, the Sumo Logic training environment, is located in Virginia. It's going to take a couple seconds for it to get to Virginia, okay? While we're here, though, let's go ahead and do Lab 3 so we can get to our break. Are there any questions about Lab 2 before I move on to Lab 3? Okay, so here in Lab 3, if I click on Lab 3, here what we're going to do is we're going to add a metric host. We're going to add a metric host. So just like before, we're going to go back to our Sumo Logic environment, back to our collector. We're going to click this add link and add source. This time we're going to select host metrics. Host metrics. And again, I get to give this thing a name. I'm going to put my initials in the word host metrics in here. I could put in a description. I could put in the source host. I don't have to. I could. I'm not going to. Source category. Again, we recommend you take advantage of this. So I am going to put in here my host metrics / my username. Okay. Or actually my initials, excuse me. Host metric and my initials. Again, you got that metadata tag. If you want it, need it, use it, you can. You don't have to. In this case, how often do you want me to go ahead and bring metrics in? You'll see I've got a range here from 10 seconds to 5 minutes. On my computer, I'm going to let it go 10 seconds. I'll let it ingest every 10 seconds, bring new metrics in. And then the question is, what metrics do I want to bring in? The ones that are checked are obviously going to be ingested. Over here, I can see a bubble listing here of what the metric is. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all my metrics. Okay. Nothing really secret about my computer. So I can add all my metrics here if I want to, and then I click save. So now I have my collector, I have my 2 sources. Now, we can in here go into our source where it says prod Apache access. I can click on this blue button, and this blue button will now run a log query, and I can see here's my log messages. So my log messages have gone from my computer, from that text file. They have been ingested into Sumo Logic. That's why I wanted to give it some time here so it would get a chance to do that. If for some reason you don't see that, change your time frame here to like the last 24 hours. Just open it up because the timestamps in here are fairly small. Okay. But you should be able to see that you got data in here. Additionally, if I go back to my collection, if I go back to my host metrics, my collector here and my host metrics, I click on that, it should open up a query and I should start seeing data come in here for my host metrics. This is my old data that was there. Here's my new data that's coming in. Okay. So our collectors are working. Now, another way that you can check this out is you can run LiveTail, right? So you can click on the new blue button, choose LiveTail, And you could do something like underscore collector equals, and then the name of your computer. And so when I run this, this will show me the data that's being ingested from that computer. This is another way of testing to see if data is in fact coming in. Okay. And since I think my log files have already come in, it says I'm not going to show you a lot there. But you can always use LiveTail to test and see if your data is in fact coming in. Okay. And I wish it would start showing me some data here, but it's not. It only shows me my log data. It doesn't show me my metric data. And only 10 people can run LiveTail concurrently on one environment at a time. So LiveTail is another tool that you can use. So what questions have you about labs 1, 2, and 3 and setting up collectors and setting up sources? Any questions? I'll get into this installing the metric host app in just a little bit. I'll come back and talk about that after the break. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? And what do you say we take a quick 5-minute break? Here's my 5-minute timer. When this timer gets down to 0, please be back. So I'd like to see you back here in about 4 minutes and 53 seconds. Have a good break. Okay, folks, hopefully we are back and ready to go. So hopefully you all had a nice little break, got a chance to refill the coffee mugs, things like that. Back to lab 3, there was a section here that says install the host metric app. Okay. Again, we've got a bunch of pre-built in apps in our environment. So if I go to my app catalog, if you go to your app catalog and I do a search for host, you'll see that we've got a host metric app that you and I can install. And if I click on this host metric app, again, here's previews of the types of information it's going to show me. And you can click on add to library, and all you need to do is give it a name and specify the source category, right? You know what the source category is. That's the source category that you and I defined. So it should be your initials your host metric / your initials. Now, I've taken the liberty of installing this. So when you install it, it installs it in your personal directory. We'll talk about how to get it to the shared library in a little bit. But here's my host metrics. And here is one that I installed just the other day. So if I go into this host metrics here, and if I start here at the overview dashboard, I can see, again, my host metric information. I can see how things are behaving, get a sense for what's happening. In this case, when I installed this particular app, I said source category equals host metric / star. So I could see all of the different host metrics that were coming in. In the actual exercise here, they want you to actually use and see only your particular host metric. They want you to specify, your specific host metric. And so you can install that host metric. Again, the source category you use is the same source category that you set up here. So when you install this and you specify the host category, this host category has to match with the source category you use down here. Otherwise, you won't see any data. Okay. All right. One thing you'll notice, I'm getting a lot of tabs open here, right? If you want to get rid of a bunch of tabs, I could, of course, close them up one at a time, but I could click on the 3 vertical dots and I could say close all tabs, and that kind of cleans things up for me. Does a fairly decent job. So any questions about labs 1, 2, and 3? All right, then. Let us go back to the slides here for a second. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about optimization tools. So as an administrator, there are ways to make things better, faster, quicker, easier. And these are our optimization tools. Our optimization tools break down into 2 broad categories: field-based optimization tools and index-based optimization tools. So under field-based optimization tools, you have field extraction rules. And you can use these, and there's really 2 big benefits of using field extraction rules. Field extraction rule, as we ingest data into Sumo Logic, will parse out those fields and make those fields available into the field browser. So that means that the users don't have to parse the fields out themselves. They're already there, they're already available in the field browser so that users can then see what's going on. So let's talk about those field-based, both field extraction rules and my field browser. Let me stop my slides here if you don't mind. And let me go in here to my Sumo Logic environment. And let me go into my navigation panel here in my main menu. And here under manage data, I want to click on logs. Now, in logs, I can see a category here called fields. And I can see a bunch of different fields. And I can see where these fields were being generated from. For example, issue key came from field extraction rules. AWS region is part of my collector. I'm sorry, no, it's, why am I not seeing it here? It's part of my field extraction rules, but the point is I should be able to see where in these tabs these things are coming from. So if I go into my field extraction rules, here is where you and I can set up field extraction rules. Now, if I go out here and I do a log search, bear with me a second, and I say I want to see where my source category equals lab/Apache/access, and I run this query, you'll notice that in my field browser here, I got a bunch of fields. Not only do I have the source and source category and source name and stuff, those are standard, but I've got a whole bunch of other fields here. And I can click on the field name and it pops up with a window showing me there's my 8 values, my 8 different values, and I can see a relative idea by count and by percentage of the different values of all of my messages here. Or I can go in and say source IP, and when I click on something that's got more than 10 values, it shows me just the top 10. But the point is, I can also click on these checkboxes and I can automatically just parse them out without having to modify my query. What got these here were my field extraction rules. So you as an administrator can go into your Sumo Logic environment, into your logs, into your field extraction rules, and you can, we can add a rule. So if you'll bear with me a second here, I'm looking for one that Odell created. And it's called FER demo, field extraction rule demo. It's applied at ingest time. Here is the source category it's going to use. And then I've got a series of parsing expressions to parse out the fields that I want. That's what's going to make those fields available in the field browser. Now, I said there were 2 benefits to this. One is the users don't have to parse this out themselves, so it's going to save time. The other thing is it's also going to set us up on a standard vocabulary, right? If a user wanted to parse out an IP address and they wanted to call it client IP, and another user grabbed client IP address and they wanted to call it source IP, and somebody else wanted to call it SAURSE IP, we'd have 3 different names for the same thing. But when I create my field extraction rule, if I designate the field name that I want to call this, and for example, right now it says SRCRP, I can change this if I want to. So just bear with me a second. And you'll notice as I change it, it's going to change it down here, and it would show up in the field browser if I save this. The point is that we now are going to standardize on certain vocabulary. We will see it in our field browser. I'm going to cancel out of this without making any changes. Therefore, my users will all know that when I want to look at the IP address, it is called SRC IP. You're using standardized vocabulary. Different people aren't using different terms to mean the same thing. It's quite a perk. So that's what my field extraction rules do to help me create my field browser results here. That's how that happens. Okay. Now, another thing that we can do, if I go back in here to my logs, we can create partitions. And we may want to partition our data for a lot of different reasons. Number one, if you're an enterprise customer, when you create a partition, you can decide what tier you want it to go into. And we charge by these different tiers. We charge differently. Continuous tier, something's going to be accessed all the time. Frequent tier is accessed frequently. Infrequently is accessed infrequently, and obviously we charge less. So when you create a partition for whatever reason, you can decide what data tier you want it to go to. And then you define what you want in this partition and how long you want to retain this partition. Now, there is a default continuous intelligence partition that if I look at, its retention period is 30 days. So when I create a new partition, I can tell it to either use my default setting or change the setting for that particular partition. Now, why would you want to partition data? It's going to make it faster and easier to search. So you and I can create partitions to improve our performance. Now, a couple of rules, and these are very important rules. These make great test questions. Number one, there should be no overlap, no data that's in two partitions. It's either in one partition or the other. It's not in both. Can't be. It's not going to do any good. Second point, you want to have less than 20 partitions. More than 20 partitions, it's a little hard to manage, a little hard to see what's going on. And then you want to ideally use between 1 to 30% of your total volume. There's no benefit of creating a partition that's going to be 98% of your volume. There's really nothing gained there, right? So you want it to be something less than a third, if you will, of your total volume, 1 to 30%. And then, of course, you want to group the data that search together most often. And then, as we said, you can also define how often you want to retain this, whether you want to retain it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever you want to do. So you can, I can, we can create partitions. And what do we use to create partitions? That wonderful source category. So if I go in here, I want to add a partition. My routing expression is going to start with some sort of a source category. Source category equals, right? How do I want to break this stuff down? So you can create partitions. Another way that we can improve performance is we can create scheduled views. Now, scheduled views run in the background all the time. They run every minute. So these scheduled views automatically get updated. Automatically. So you can, I can, we can create scheduled views. Now, what's this scheduled view going to do for me? Well, if I look at Bhargavi's schedule view here, and if I open it up to view details, I can see that Bhargavi's got a query in here that runs, like I said, every minute. Okay. And so it's automatically going to aggregate and show the various data and stuff that she wants to show. And the way that you access a scheduled view when you want to run it is, instead of searching for things like source category or whatever, you say, I want to do _view, and then the name of that view. And you'll find that these views run very, 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 very fast. Okay. So I specified one of the names of the views or the scheduled views. You'll see it runs very, very fast. Okay. So we got Apache logs, right? So let's do that. Let's go. Apache logs. When I run it, should be darn close to instantaneous. Of course, the fact it's got no data in it doesn't really help me. Doesn't tell the story that I want, but these things run, they're automatically updated in the background every minute. So scheduled views is a way of improving performance. And let me again talk about this and show you the slide, because there's some great test questions here. So scheduled views for small and historic subset data that you want. It's automatically going to aggregate and run these things every minute. The views are updated once a minute by the system automatically. You can also do backfilling if you've got old stuff. Reference it by _view equals whatever the name of the view is. The data does not count against your ingest volume. That is to say, if you're not using aggregation. And we recommend that you do this with pre-aggregated data. And again, you want to try to take advantage of where you've got a lot of log messages you're trying to consolidate. So 1 to 10,000 ratio or better that basically you want to run into. So scheduled views, like I said, are automatically run every minute in the background, and you can use those. Some things we might use scheduled views for: web access trends, threat analysis, user behavior, things like that. So those are our optimization techniques and optimization tools. Now let's talk a little bit here about overview and data management and account management. So again, let me stop my slides for a second and let's get into here and let's look at the tool. So here under administration, here under your account, you can see your account overview. And I don't know if you're on the credits model or something else, but if you're on the credits model, you can see where you are within your periodicity, how you're consuming credits, whether you're consuming them too fast, too slow, whatever. Down here, you can see your various ingest areas, how many metrics and stuff you're ingesting, right? So you can see, what you're ingesting here as far as metrics, as far as data. and see how you're burning through your credits. We've also got some dashboards to help you with that. But you can basically get a sense for what your contract is, and again, how many metrics you have or how much data you're ingesting. You can go in here to data management. Now, this checkbox, if you want to use the data volume app that we have, you must check this checkbox. What does the data volume app do? Well, you're going to find that in lab 4, you get to install that app. But in my case, if I go in here and if I find it, let's start with, there's an overview here. I always like the overviews to start with. You can install this app. And here in this app, I can see at an overview of how much logs I'm ingesting, my log volume, my top 5 collectors, my top 5 sources. I can see how much metrics I'm ingesting, my top 5 collectors, my top 5 sources. Then if I want to, I can go into more specifically on my metrics or on my logs. How am I doing here? What am I ingesting? My ingestment trends, again, sources, collectors, information, that sort of thing. A prediction here of how much I'm ingesting over time, whether I will exceed my values, things like that. So this is an app that's in our app catalog. So here in our app catalog, if I get rid of this and I type in data, you'll see that we have a data volume app that you could install absolutely free of charge, part of Sumo Logic. And the only trick is, in order to see data in it, you have to make sure that in your account, your data management thing is checked here. And then you can see what kind of data are you ingesting, what's happening, what units, what business units are charging, more, using, consuming more data and things like that. So it's a real handy app in that regard. While we're here under Manage Plan, if you click on Manage Plan, if you want to either upgrade or downgrade your account or something like that, you can type it in here. It'll immediately go to your account team. Your account team will take action, reach out, contact you, take action on this, and you're all set. So this is just another way of communicating with your account team, managing your plan. Okay. So this is your account information. Let's jump on security here for a second. Look at the security tabs. Let me also, if you don't mind, let me close all the other tabs except for my security tab. So I'm going to choose to close all the other tabs. So this one has a series of subtabs. So here's my password policy. If you're not using any other third-party authentication system with Sumo Logic, this is your password policy, right? So you can define passwords expire, logouts, lockouts, and stuff like that. Here under your service account settings, service allow list settings, what we can do is we can either check and say enable login API allow list. We check mark that and we put some IP addresses in. That means that these folks can access Sumo Logic without having to log in. They can just come right in it. Now you might say that's kind of contrary to your security model, and I understand that. But maybe you've got some shareholders or some folks that you want to be able to access the environment without having to log in. Okay. Again, if I'm a shareholder, I'd be afraid of that, but that's me. Now, what I'm seeing here is an IP address. This is an IP address. Down here, this is an IP address with CIDR. All right. A class is internet domain routing. This is basically the subnet mask. So basically it means anything that comes from 103.219.207, I'm going to basically let through. Okay. So you can see what the range is. It can be an IP address or a range of IP addresses with a CIDR that you put in here. Now, if I check mark this one, I'm allowing people to be able to access dashboards without having to log in. And this is probably a better use case. I don't want to let anybody into my system unless they authenticate, but I may want to take my shareholders or my publicly faced company, and I may want to create a dashboard that I want my analysts to see and people to see. So I may check mark this, and if they come in from these IP addresses, they will be able to see that dashboard or those dashboards. So that's where the dashboard allow list. We used to call these whitelist and blacklist. We decided to be a little more politically correct and call it allow list and deny list. But be that as it may, that's what they are. And that's what they're used for. So that's what the service allow list settings do. They let you either log in without having to log in or see dashboards without having to log in. So by specific IP address. The only people who can do this are these IP addresses and these IP address ranges. So that's what your allow list settings are. Under access keys, remember I showed you how you and I can create an access key? Well, from an administrator's point of view, I can see all the access keys that we have. I can also see all the installation tokens that we have, and I can create an installation token here if I want to. Remember that an installation token is a one-time thing, right? So if I want to use an installation token, I create one, I hit save, there's my token, and this token, there it is. I can only use it once and then it's done. So it's a one-time type thing. So I'm going to throw it away. Now, SAML, if you want to connect to other third-party authentication systems, you're going to use SAML, Security Assertion Markup Language. And you're going to go in here and define what you want to authenticate to and whether or not you want to, what the policies are and all that fun stuff. So if I want to connect into my Azure Active Directory, I can specify that. If I want to connect into Okta and other systems, I can specify that. So here is where you put in your other systems that you're connecting in through. Now, a user has some interesting policies. So let me go into my user account here. Let me go into my preferences. By default, in my preferences, hang on a second. Okay, I'm sorry, here it is. By default, system-wide, you can specify and say in your security that I want to require a two-step authentication. Not only do you need a password, but maybe you need something else, a QR code or something like that. You can do that at the system level. You can also do that at a specific user level, enable two-step verification. So for example, maybe you want to make sure your administrators are using two-step verification, but the rest of the company can use single step. So it can be set by the user or it can be set company-wide, policy-wide. And then last but not least here, under policies, here is some policies that you and I can take advantage of here. So first of all, Sumo Logic Auditing. I talked about the data volume app, right? How you can go into the data volume app and see things. Well, we also have an auditing app that you can install. So again, in our app catalog, there is an auditing app that you can install. I've already taken the liberty of installing it. And here I can see in my auditing app what actions people are using, where they're logging in from, who my most active users are, what are they doing here as far as database stuff, creating and all that stuff, user activity over time. I can also look, there's an admin mode, so I can see what my administrators are up to, right? Whether they're deleting things, creating things, and our administrators aren't doing too much right now. So whether we're importing data, whether we're creating and deleting data, all kinds of stuff. This is another one of those built-in apps. But in order for this app to work, I've got to enable this checkbox. Got to enable this checkbox. Also, if you want people to be able to search, they're using the account searching capabilities, I've got to enable this checkbox. And again, you can click learn more about that sort of thing if you need to. More information here. All right. By default, our support department doesn't have as much control or access to your environment as you may think. So if you call our support, we'll be able to access and see, things are running, things are going on, that sort of thing. But we may need you to check mark this so we can dig deeper into your account, deeper into your environment, things like that. And then when we're done, we're going to ask you to clear that checkbox. So the point is your system is part of our certifications, part of our security certifications, all stuff. We want to make sure you're in control of whether or not we have access to stuff. Yeah, we can run a query, we can run some simple stuff, but if we need deeper access, we're going to need you to check mark that. I mentioned earlier with the allow list that you and I could access dashboards outside of the organization. Well, do you want to be able to do that? Yes or no? Okay. And as far as data access, do I run that as my credentials or the person who created it? If it's check marked, you run it as your credentials. When I look at that dashboard, I'm looking at it through my credentials. If it's not check marked, I'm running it and the credentials of whoever shared it with me, their credentials. So again, it's the little setting there. And then do you want to allow a number of concurrent sessions? As you all probably know, you could open up as many sessions into our training environment as you want to and play in here. We could limit that if we want to. We can also define what the user session timeout is. So that means if you're idle for 2 hours, it automatically logs you out and compels you to log back in. There is a session timeout that's a part of the system. And when you create new accounts, it's going to use that. But for a user account, if I go into their preferences, here under a user's account preferences, here's also where the web search session timeout is. So if people are having to log in frequently and stuff like that, and they're getting annoyed at that, you might want to consider adjusting your web session timeout. Okay. So you can do that as well. So those are all the cool settings there. There's one other couple things we need to talk about here. So first of all, any questions so far? Go back to administration. Let's talk about users and roles. By default, in Sumo Logic, when you create a new Sumo Logic environment, there are 2 roles that are automatically created: the administrator role and the analyst role. The administrator role and the analyst role. So bear with me here just a second. Okay, your administrator role can manage your users and roles. They can view and manage collectors. That's what the administrator can do. An analyst, on the other hand, has full data access and can't manage your users or your collectors. That's how things were decided to be. Now, you can, I can, we can create additional roles. So up here, I can click new role. I can create it. Maybe I want to call this my accounting team, right? I want to specify something for my accounting team. Where it says search filter here is where I can restrict what they can see based on data source. So remember we said source category, I can use it to filter my queries. I can also use it to create my partitions and indexes. I can also use it to affect what people can see through RBAC, role-based access control. Here's where I specify via RBAC. So if I say source category equals labs/accounting, that means the only thing that these folks can see is lab/accounting. They can't see any other data source. So you can restrict what they can see here if you want to when you create a role. Now down here is what privileges that role has. Can they view collectors? Can they manage collectors? Can they, do whatever with collectors? Manage tokens, view parsers, entity management. They do logs to metrics and all that good stuff. Here, as far as security, what things they can do as far as security. For those of you interested in our cloud SIEM environment, our cloud security information event management, if you want them to have any rights to cloud SIEM, you've got to give them the ability to see this option first. So you check mark that, and then you can control what they can do with insights, content, and configuration. So that's basically a setting that you're going to go in here and play with if you want to deal with cloud SIEM. So you and I create a role, great, and that role is going to do whatever we want it to do. Then I can create users and I can add them to roles. So I want to create a new user, Fred Flintstone. And I need Fred's email. So ff@hannabarber.com. And then I can decide what roles I want Fred to have. So what happens is the effective roles are the union of these roles. So if I give him analyst and administrator, effectively he has the union of whatever an analyst can do and whatever the administrator can do. You get the union of those roles. So you create a user, you assign it roles, you create roles, assign them specific privileges. That is role-based access control. And that's how we operate as far as security goes. If you choose to delete a user, right? You've got a user that's no longer with the company, right? If you choose to delete them, it's going to ask you, what do you want to do with all their content? And so you typically want to assign it, whatever your company policy is with regards to that is probably what you want to follow. So for example, back when I was an IT manager, right? We had the policy that says if somebody leaves the company, all of their data, files, stuff like that goes to their boss. So if somebody leaves the company here, you want to take all their personal stuff and move it to their boss, that's fine. You can move it to another user or whatever you want to do. So you can, when you delete a user, it'll ask you, what do you want to do about that user? Okay. Any questions about user management, role management? Just one more thing to talk about, and that is content administration. How in the heck do I get stuff in this library, right? That's the job of the administrator. And if you click on this lovely home tab, and if you click on home, excuse me, I'm sorry, click on this file tab, this file browser tab, there you go. By default, you typically are viewing it with your permissions, with your rights and that sort of thing. But if you're a content administrator, you'll be able to grab this pull down and change this to content administration. So here as my content administrator, you'll see I have my admin recommended folder and my users. If I go into my users, I'm going into a user's personal folder. So as an administrator, I can take somebody user's personal folder stuff and I can take some of the stuff and I can move it if I want to. So I can go through here and I can select various things and I can move them to another, I can move them to the shared folder or another directory, whatever I want to do. Okay. I can delete them. But here is typically where you manage that. You can actually go into a user's directory and see the stuff that the user actually has and run it and share it and do whatever the heck it is you want to do. Now, back to our library, back up here at the root, we recommend that you create an admin recommended folder. And that's the one that we recommend that you create so that you can put stuff in there that might be important for your organization. So when I go back and look at this as me, when I go in here, I see here's my admin recommended folder. And here I can see the stuff that's really, really important. And then additionally, if I want to, I can also have other content besides what's in my admin recommended folder that maybe we want to have for whatever reason. So you can build out these menus. And as I said, you can take this content if you need to, and if you need to, you can move it, right? You can move it from one environment to another. I'm sorry, I don't want to use the user. Let me grab his content, excuse me. Okay, let's grab the user. It's got some content. Bargavy's probably got something here. Nope. Try the other Bargavy. There we go. So I could take some of Bargavy's content here and you see I can move it, I can export it, I can import it, I can delete it if I want to. So these are things you can do as a content administrator. Now, let me get back to the labs because obviously I've skipped over some of that. So labs 1, 2, and 3 we did. In lab 4, what you can do is I showed you earlier the data volume app and the audit app. So if you want to, you can install those apps and see what kind of content they have. Okay. By the way, if you get test questions about those apps and you didn't install them, you can ask me or Odell and we'll tell you, show you those apps and let you see what's on those apps and that sort of thing. But basically what Lab 4 has you do is it has you install two apps, the data volume app and the audit app, so you can see what kind of cool information it gives you. Okay. And then you can also share these apps. You know how to share an app, I assume, but if you don't, if I create an app in my personal folder, I can go to the 3 vertical dots and I can share this with somebody else. So you can share it with the entire organization, a specific role, or a specific named user. Okay. Now, that's what Lab 4 is. Lab 5 says here to try simple analytics. Lab 5 wants you to go back to our fundamentals course. And in our fundamentals course, they want you to do labs 2 through 6. And if you've already done our fundamentals course, you don't really need to do these again. So as an administrator, it simply wants to give you an appreciation for creating queries and things like that. So if you want to do lab 5, you certainly can, but don't worry too much about it. Lab 6 is a lab where we are going to alert you when your data ingest reaches whatever of your threshold. So when you're getting close to full and you're going to wind up paying more money. So here we have a query that we provide for you that you can in fact run. I'm going to go ahead and run this query real quick, and I'm going to walk you through the query. Okay. All right. So the first thing is we're looking at the index of Sumo Logic volume. We're looking at our volume where we store all the good stuff here. We're looking at the source category about our collector volume. Then we are going to parse out certain fields. We are going to parse out our size in bytes, our collector, our count, and our gigabytes here, right? And we're going to take the number of bytes, we're going to divide it by 1024, divide by 1024, divide by 1024 to convert it to gigabytes. So we're talking about gigabytes. Then we're going to sum our gigabytes by collector. So here in my aggregates, I can see in my aggregates, my collectors, I can see the amount of gigabytes that I have. Then I'm also going to calculate my total gigabytes as my volume for today. So how much have I ingested as of today? And then I'm going to arbitrarily figure out what your daily plan limit is. I'm going to set up a value. In this case, they set up a value of 100. Okay. Your value could be 200 or whatever your gigabit limit size is. And I want to take your gigabits divided by today's volume to figure out how much percentage of today's volume am I consuming. I also want to take today's volume minus my plan size to see how I'm doing against plan. And then I've got a where clause. And this where clause can be adjusted so that you want to make sure you're only seeing when you're getting close to your threshold. Right now, I'm looking against where my volume against plan is equal to 0.002. If I made this 0.02 and I ran this, you'll see I've got a lot less data because I'm not that close to plan. So you can adjust this number as you want to see how close to plan or not plan you are. This is a small fraction of our plan, right? 0.002, right? So obviously the value of 1 is I'm at plan. So this is a small fraction of plans. Then I sort based on gigabytes. Then I specify what fields I want to see here. And that's basically what this query does. So it's a handy query. Again, could I get the same information in my data volume app? Absolutely, I sure could. The thing we liked about this is it's create an alert. So you and I can go in here and have an alert that we can in fact use to set things up. Okay, we can actually schedule this and create this as an alert and run this every hour or every day or whatever. We can schedule this to run daily or whatever, and let us know if we're having problems. Okay. or if we're close to our limit, really is what we're trying to do. Because obviously the last thing you want to do is have to owe money, right? You want to be aware of it. But your data volume map also provides the same information. One other thing I want to mention to you all, because you're administrators. Under managed data, there's a section in here called monitoring. This is something that we've recently added. We added it about 6 to 9 months ago. And if I go in here to monitoring, you can create folders that you want to put your monitors in. So if you want to group your folders by region or by environment or by whatever, you can create a folder and then put your monitors in them. But there's also these new monitors that you can create. These new monitors are queries that can be based either on log queries or metric queries, where you can set certain values. Number one, if I'm missing data, if I'm not receiving any data, that means that my collector must be down. That could be a problem for me. I want to be notified, right? Or if I'm getting a CPU at a certain level, I can set a warning level. And if it goes even higher still, I can set a critical level. So you define what the levels are based on your query, and then you decide how you want to be notified. Do you want to be notified via email, via Slack, via Teams, via what other web hook and web systems do you want to connect to? And then you give that monitor a name. So just wanted to mention that to you. It's fairly new. We haven't written into the course yet. Back to my labs. By the way, this is the last lab, lab 6. So any questions about anything we've talked about? Any questions any of you administrators have? And let's do this. Let's get ready for our exam. So what I want you to do is I want you to log out of Sumo Logic's training environment. So again, click on the tab here, the Sumo Logic tab, open up your Navigation Explorer, go to your main menu, find where it says Training plus Admin Account, click on it, click Sign Out, and I want you to log into your company's Sumo Logic environment. So you're logged in with your name, your credentials, right? And then once you log in with your name and your credentials, if you would, please click on the home, click on certification, click on get certified. And here, ladies and gentlemen, you should see all these lovely options. You want to click on get certified. Now, just so you know, up here in the upper right-hand corner of this is your profile. And if you go into your profile, you'll see all of the tests and stuff that you have passed. And you can view your certificate. You can add it to your LinkedIn profile. You can see when things are going to expire, all kinds of fun stuff like that. That's your profile. You can even add a picture if you want. So I added a picture just to show you what can be done. I scroll all the way down here. These are tests and stuff that I have taken, passed, and all that good stuff. We keep track of all this, okay? Now, what you want to do is you want to go find the administration exam. You'll register for it. Takes about a second. Poof, you're registered. That's it. Then before you start, the exam consists of 30 questions. You've got 60 minutes to complete it, right? So open book, open notes, open instructor. Questions are fill in the blanks, matching text, multiple choice, single choice, et cetera, et cetera. Passing score is 75%. Now, I'm going to click next here. I don't want you to do anything, just watch. When I click next, it's going to take me to my exam. And there I see my 60-minute counter. And as I start to scroll down, my counter starts. So it says here, the user.properties file lets you pass configuration parameters during the installation of a newly registered collector. Which of the following is not a valid parameter? Oh, heck, I forgot. I think it's Livetail, but I got to look it up. I actually have to look it up in the documentation. Okay. Unlike hosted cloud collectors, local and centralized data collectors do not require installation. Okay. Unlike hosted collectors, local and centralized. No, they do require installation. That statement is false. So I'm just answering a couple of questions here for you. Then I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to submit my answers. Now, obviously, I'm going to fail. All right, I get you. I failed. You're absolutely right. But I can see what I got right and what I got wrong. I don't know why I got it wrong, but I can see what I got right, what I got wrong. And most importantly, when you're done, please make sure you click close this course. So it takes this, when you pass it, click close course so it writes it to your profile. Okay. That's my only ask of you. Because that way it writes it to your profile, adds it to your profile as though it really happened. If you don't click this, the exam did not happen. Okay. So what questions have you, ladies and gentlemen? Before I turn off my recording and let you guys take your exams. Any questions? One last thing. Tomorrow's class is on observability fundamentals. So in tomorrow's class, we're going to talk about, under new, things like our root cause explorer, things like our traces and our spans and our service maps. So if you want to know, and our root cause explorer here, we're going to talk about those tomorrow in the root cause, the AWS observability class, the observability fundamentals class, excuse me. And then on Thursday, we're going to talk about how to set that stuff up. So it's the fundamentals administration class, where we show you how to set up open telemetry, data collection, and all that cool stuff. So just wanted to remind you, in case you're interested in signing up for those classes. Otherwise, I want to thank you all for attending. I hope you all had a great time. And I encourage you to take the test, but otherwise I will stop and let you guys do what you need to do. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Odell, anything you want to answer? I see Odell put the form on the chat box. Thank you, sir. All right, so let me go ahead and stop my recording.